The day the company announced it was downsizing, you sat at your desk pretending to read emails while your vision narrowed to a tunnel. The hum of fluorescent lights became a kind of white roar, and the bustling chatter of co-workers blurred into the indistinct rustle of a distant crowd. You felt exactly the way you had during the final seconds of a roller coaster ascent when everything pauses, click, 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 and you realize the drop is inevitable. In that instant, you discovered something ancient in yourself, the mind's desperate wish to control what cannot be controlled. Even before your manager called you into the glass-walled conference room, you began negotiating with invisible forces. If I work harder, if I stay later, if I volunteer for every thankless task, maybe Axe will miss me. The bargaining was reflexive, primitive, unspoken. It was the same bargaining a child makes with the dark. If I keep my feet under the blanket, the monster can't reach me. Carl Jung wrote that chaos is not the enemy of consciousness. It is the raw material out of which consciousness must fashion meaning. Yet most lives remain organized around the illusion that chaos can be eliminated if we just plan better, work harder, lock every door, map every route, vet every relationship. You spent years building your life like a fortress against uncertainty. Calendars color-coded to the quarter hour, savings accounts duplicated in separate banks, daily routines precise enough to impress the military. And for a time, the fortress held. Bills were paid, promotions arrived, relationships thrummed along predictable rails. But beneath the clean surface, the psyche stirred restlessly, sensing that the control you cherished was a thin veneer stretched over tectonic plates. Eventually, those plates were bound to shift. The downsizing was the tremor that cracked the veneer. You survived, but at a cost. The role you kept now required the workload of 2 positions, and the team that once felt like a family scattered into weariness and silent competition. No amount of scheduling apps could insulate you from the aftershocks. At night, spreadsheets blurred, digits swooning into patterns you couldn't decipher. You began waking at 2 a.m. with jaw clenched and heart hammering, certain you had missed an email that would unravel the last knot of security. And there, in the half-dark, you faced a truth you had long resisted. The fortress of control is built on sand. It was during one of those sleepless dawns that you stumbled across Jung's description of the ego as a small island of light surrounded by the vast shadowy ocean of the unconscious. He argued that the quest for total control over life's currents is not only futile but damaging. It shrinks awareness to a pinhole and constricts possibility to the width of fear's corridor. As you read, something in you, a voice you often dismissed, murmured agreement. But habit is powerful. You closed the book and opened your calendar, determined to keep the waves at bay with one more ring of sandbags. Weeks later, you found yourself driving home on a rain-slick highway, the sky an apocalyptic bruise. Traffic slowed to a crawl, and taillights bleed into red ribbons across the windshield. It felt like a tableau of stalled progress. Hundreds of people boxed in metal shells, each gripping a wheel, pretending mastery while nature hurled water at 30 miles per hour. In that creeping line of cars, you were forced to face the uncomfortable reality that control is conditional. You control the wheel until a patch of oil intervenes, control your body until a rogue cell multiplies, control your relationships until another human's free will collides with your expectations. As thunder shuddered overhead, you heard in your mind Jung's warning, what we refuse to accept will dominate us from the dark. That night, long after the storm receded, you stood on your balcony breathing humid air that smelled of wet soil and jasmine. The city lights shimmered like delusions of permanence against the cloud-torn sky. You realized you had a choice: keep fortifying the illusion or learn a new relationship with uncertainty. The idea frightened you. Chaos threatened everything you had built. Yet another part of you, older, wilder, felt an unexpected hum of excitement. That hum was the self. Jung would say, the archetype of totality pressing upward from the depths, urging you toward wholeness beyond defensive routines. Change began not with fireworks, but with a small decision. You left 3 hours unscheduled on a Saturday, blank space on the calendar that once would have triggered panic. You promised yourself you would not fill it with chores or errands or even productive leisure. When the gap arrived, you felt fidgety, borderless, as if someone had removed gravity. You sat on a park bench watching squirrels dart across damp grass. Time stretched into a curious loop. Minutes felt like origami, folding and unfolding around nothing in particular. At first, boredom hissed accusations. You're wasting precious daylight. But under those accusations lay a whisper. This is where life leaks in. You began experimenting with controlled doses of unpredictability. You took a different route to work, left your phone at home during an errand, entered a cafe without scanning reviews. Each tiny act of surrender felt like loosening a muscle clenched since childhood. Resistance still barked, but curiosity padded alongside. One evening curiosity led you to an improv class. Standing under harsh fluorescent lights in a church basement, surrounded by strangers pretending to be vending machines, you experienced terror and exhilaration in equal parts. When the instructor declared there were no mistakes, only offers, something inside you cracked open. You laughed so hard your chest ached, not because the scenes were polished, but because they were alive. Chaos was not predator, but playground. Yet the fortress did not fall overnight. Some days you regressed, triple-checking locks, obsessively refreshing inboxes, rehearsing conversations that never occurred. Control, like any addiction, fights eviction. Jung suggested treating such complexes with dialogue rather than force. So you began conversing with your need for certainty. You journaled as though that need were a character sitting across from you. It told you it formed during childhood when sudden moves meant shattered cups and raised voices. It confessed it kept you safe when bullying at school turned corridors into minefields. You thanked it for protecting you, but informed it the war zone was largely gone and its tactics now suffocated growth. The conversation did not end conflict, but it softened it into cooperation. Dreams shifted too. The highway dreams diminished. In their place came a recurring scene of you walking along the shoreline at dusk, waves erasing footprints behind you. Each time you carried different objects, a briefcase, then a violin, then a broken compass. The ocean's approach felt both ominous and benevolent. You analyzed symbols, the briefcase a symbol of identity, the violin of creativity, the compass of direction. The sea, raw chaos, returned each item to undifferentiated possibility. Rather than panic, you began to feel relief. Footprints erased meant mistakes reset, baggage relinquished, maps redrawn. One afternoon, while scanning news of market fluctuations, you closed your laptop mid-article and whispered enough. You realized that tracking every volatility index did not immunize you against risk. It merely littered your mind with hypothetical disasters. You set screen limits. You replaced doom scrolling with reading myths about trickster gods, coyotes, ravens, herms, the archetypes that embody creative disorder. In their tales you recognized the potential of disruption to birth invention. Without trickster energy, Jung argued, culture ossifies. Without trickster energy, individuals calcify too. In therapy, you practiced surrender as muscle memory. Your therapist invited you to a simple exercise. Close your eyes, lean backward, and allow her to catch you. The first attempt, your spine snapped forward on instinct. The second time, you stiffened like timber even as she supported your shoulders. Only on the fifth try did you release tension enough to feel the strange buoyancy of being held. Tears blurred your vision before you opened your eyes. They were not tears of fear, but of relief. Surrender, you discovered, was not freefall into oblivion. It was falling into connection with another human with the ground of being. At work, you began experimenting with uncertainty in creative projects. Instead of rigid project plans, you adopted agile frameworks, sprints, iterations, retrospectives. You invited junior colleagues to critique your ideas, a move that once would have felt like inviting wolves to dinner. Their feedback stung, but it also sparked breakthroughs you wouldn't have found alone. The department's metrics improved, but more importantly, the atmosphere loosened. Laughter returned to cubicles. Colleagues proposed wild solutions without preemptive apology. Your personal relationships shifted too. For years, you had curated interactions like museum exhibits, presenting only the artifacts polished for admiration. Now, you confessed anxieties before they congealed into resentment. You asked friends to pick the restaurant, resisting the urge to Yelp veto their choices. On dates, instead of orchestrating flawless evenings, you embraced improvisation. Rainy picnics under awnings, mismatched playlists, wrong turns leading to unexpected murals. These moments lacked Instagram perfection, yet they pulsed with authenticity, weaving memories tougher than orchestrated shine. One evening, as autumn sun bled coral across the skyline, you sat on the same bench in the park where you first practiced unscheduled time. A child nearby built towers of leaves just to watch wind dismantle them. Each collapse elicited shrieks of delight. You realized the child was playing with impermanence. Control had no role in her joy. Partnership with unpredictability was the game. You felt a pang for years spent in leafless rigidity. But self-reproach faded quickly, replaced by gratitude that you had found your way here at all. That night you dreamed again of the shore, but now the tide receded, revealing tide pools, glittering like galaxies. You crouched to peer into one. It brimmed with sea stars, anemones, tiny fish darting between kelp fronds. The briefcase, the violin, and the compass rested gently in the sand, partly covered in iridescent foam. You lifted the compass, and its needle spun freely, pointing nowhere and everywhere. You laughed, a deep belly laugh that echoed across the dreamscape. The ocean whispered back, not in words, but in a rhythm older than language. When you awoke, the laugh vibrated in your chest like a drum beat. You opened your curtains to dawn light, felt its warmth, and for a moment, you let plans dissolve into that glow. You knew emails awaited, bills beckoned, routines demanded. But they could wait for the space of 5 full breaths. Each inhale carried tides of possibility. Each exhale released the fortress brick by brick. You have not become chaos. You have learned to dance with it. Control still visits, but now it knocks politely, and you decide when it may enter. The calendar remains, but white space blooms like fertile fields between appointments. You still save for emergencies, but you also fund adventures with equal fervor. You still read market news, but balance the feed with poetry. You still lock your door at night, but in dreams you leave windows open to starlit seas. And so the story continues, an improvisation scored by uncertainty's jazz. One day you may wake to new tremors, layoffs, illness, heartbreak, but you will meet them not with sandbags, but with surfboard and lantern, ready to ride and ready to see. You will remember the child's leaf tower, the trickster's grin, the shore's erasure and revelation. You will remember that life is not a fortress to occupy, but a current to navigate. The conversation between ego and chaos never ends, but now it sings in harmony more often than it clashes in discord. You step onto each day's stage, no longer an understudy, but a co-author with the unknown, pen poised to capture whatever improvisation unfolds. Weeks slip by, and you notice the season sharpening. Air turns glassy in the mornings, leaves rust to ember. Commuters pull collars high against a chill that feels both bracing and intimate. One Thursday you wake early, compelled by an impulse with no obvious source. You pack a small backpack, water, sketchbook, sweater, and drive toward the mountains before sunrise paints the valley. The highway unwinds like dark ribbon, and for once you don't fill the car with podcasts or news. You let the engines hum and the faint whistle of wind compose the soundtrack. When dawn finally cracks the horizon, rich lines glow violet, then peach, then gold, as though the mountains themselves are embers stoked by unseen bellows. At the trailhead, a wooden sign warns of uneven terrain and sudden weather shifts. You smile. Those words once signified threat, now invitation. The path curls upward through fir and aspen. Your breath plumes, heart drums in rising altitude. Halfway up, fog drifts between trees, muffling sound into sacred hush. You pause, lean against a moss-stained boulder, and feel the mountains pulse under your spine, slow, massive, unrushed. Suddenly you understand the phrase deep time, sense how your spreadsheet anxieties are quick sparks in the granite's epochal narrative. As you climb higher, fog thins into pale sunlight, and the trail opens onto a high meadow strewn with late-season wildflowers, improbably bright against frost-kissed grass. In the center stands a lone weather-polished cedar, branches twisted as though in perpetual dance with alpine wind. Something about that cedar stops you. You drop the pack, sit cross-legged, and simply look. The tree is not symmetrical, not picturesque in postcard terms, yet radiates presence, a monument to survival through lightning strikes, harsh snowpack, blistering summer light. You sense your own life's asymmetries reflected: layoffs, panic, midnight negotiations with the unknown. And like the cedar, those scars have sculpted unexpected grace. You close your eyes and practice a new ritual learned in therapy: surrender breathing. Inhale 5 counts, hold 2, exhale 7. With each breath, you picture releasing another rusted bolt of control. First your obsession with market futures, then your fear of missteps, then your need to curate every conversation. In the quiet that follows, a memory floats up. You as a child building dams in a creek, delighted each time water burst through improvised walls. The pleasure was not in maintaining the barrier, but in witnessing the rush when constraint gave way. You laugh softly. The child knew what the adult forgot. Flow is the game. You pull out the sketchbook, pencil loose in practiced hand, and begin to draw the cedar, not to capture every detail, but to honor its crooked dance. Lines wobble, shading smudges, but perfection isn't the goal. When you finish, you notice the drawing resembles not just a tree, but a nervous system: roots like dendrites, trunk like spine, branches like synaptic reach. The mountain, the mind, the cedar, all wired for adaptation. Clouds pile in the west, signaling afternoon storms. You shoulder the pack and start descending, knees complaining pleasantly. At a switchback you encounter a stranger, a grey-haired woman leaning on trekking poles, gazing at distant peaks. She greets you with eyes bright as glacial lakes and says, "Isn't it glorious how small we are up here?" You nod, feeling words unnecessary. She chuckles. People spend fortunes chasing control. Then a gust of wind on a ridge explains everything. You want to ask her name, her story, but she steps aside, raising a hand in gentle salute. You continue downward, her words echoing with the clarity of alpine air. Driving home, rain drums roof and windshield, but instead of gripping the wheel white-knuckled, you ease into the rhythm, tires slicing puddles, wipers keeping time. You arrive soaked and exhilarated. That night you pin the cedar sketch beside the dragon drawing. 2 guardians now, fire of imagination, root of resilience. In the weeks that follow, unforeseen challenges test your revolving dance with uncertainty. The key co-worker resigns, leaving projects wobbling. Supply chain snarls jeopardize deadlines. Echo swallows a lost sewing needle, requiring emergency surgery. Old instincts lunge for the steering wheel of control. You feel fingers twitch toward hyper-planning, disaster forecasting, tight-jawed vigilance. But then you glimpse the cedar sketch and remember the mountain's pace. You breathe, delegate tasks, solicit creative solutions from junior staff, and accept friends' offers to help with Echo's vet visits. Each acceptance of aid is a small revolution against your former self-sufficiency fetish. Echo recovers, wagging tail stitched but spirited. The project limps, innovates, then surpasses original scope through team ingenuity unlocked by shared ownership. On a quiet Sunday, you stand at your kitchen window watching wind rattle autumn branches. You think of a line from John you once underlined in frantic search for certainty. We do not solve the problem. We grow larger than the problem. You finally grasp its truth. Chaos hasn't shrunk. You have expanded. Control hasn't vanished. It's been rerouted, shifting from brittle rigidity to supple stewardship. You still plan, but leave margins wide enough for unanticipated melodies. That evening you host friends for dinner. No meticulous menu, just a pot of stew that welcomes whatever ingredients guests bring. Conversation flits from philosophy to terrible puns to impromptu humming of a half-remembered folk song. Laughter bubbles, stew dwindles, candles melt low. Someone asks, what project excites you now? You glance at the cedar sketch, at the empty notebook page under your 4-word compass, and answer, learning how to host uncertainty with the same generosity I offer guests. The table falls silent, not awkward but thoughtful. A friend raises a glass. To generous uncertainty, glasses clink. Echo barks once, as though to bless the toast. Later, dishes stacked, house quiet, you sit at the desk and finally write on the blank page. Build a sanctuary bigger than fear. You realize sanctuary isn't walls, but spaciousness within schedules, within conversations, within the self. You commit to cultivating that space in every room you enter. You close the notebook, lean back, and sense that ancient humming again. The self satisfied yet curious for the next ridge. You whisper thank you to the cedar, the mountain storm, the stranger on the switchback. You look at Echo curled beneath the desk, breathing rhythmic proof of survival. Outside, wind shifts, carrying night-blooming jasmine into the room. You inhale, exhale, and feel not the end of a story, but the steady opening of an ever-widening circle. A week later, dawn slips between the blinds like a quiet invitation. You wake without alarm, still tasting the dream you just left. Walking a rope bridge strung across mist, wind swinging the planks, yet your balance sure. That feeling lingers as you brew coffee, the aroma threading through rooms washed pale by first light. The day's agenda waits on your desk, but instead of diving in, you take your mug to the balcony and watch city rooftops emerge from dawn's blue hush. Somewhere below, a bakery truck rattles over cobblestones. From a window across the street, a saxophone warns slow scales. The world assembles itself without your choreography, proof that participation can replace orchestration. By mid-morning, you're on a video call with a team spread across 3 continents, troubleshooting stalled initiative. Old instincts to micromanage twitch, but you choose inquiry over command. What do we gain, you ask, if the plan fails gracefully instead of succeeding perfectly? Silence. Then someone suggests pivoting to a pilot rather than full launch. Relief ripples across squares of faces. Tension softens. Failure reframed as laboratory, not verdict. After the call, an email pings from a junior developer. Thank you for letting uncertainty breathe. I felt heard. You smile. Evidence that spaciousness travels through fiber optics as surely as through mountain air. That afternoon a friend texts, flash mob poetry in the old arcade at 6, you in? Spontaneity once felt like ambush. Now it tingles like invitation. You leave paperwork unfinished, grab a coat, and head north. The arcade's marble hallway reverberates with footsteps and neon buzz. People gather, strangers shoulder to shoulder. some clutching folded papers, others empty-handed, eyes bright with mischief. At 6 sharp, someone clicks off the overhead lights. Hush tumbles. A voice breaks the dark with a single line of verse. Another voice answers from farther down the hall. Soon dozens erupt in call and response stanzas, words ricocheting against tile like sparks. You add your own verse, nervous, shaky, alive. When the lights snap back on, applause detonates. Laughter spills everywhere. You realize no one controlled that moment, yet it unfolded like choreography powered by shared trust. Walking home, evening rain freckles your coat. Street lamps halo every droplet. The city looks freshly invented. At an intersection, you pause beside a mural you never noticed, colors riotous, shapes unfinished, space left for passers-by to add strokes. Cones of chalk rest in a milk crate below. You kneel, draw a small cedar tree with roots threading into a dragon's tail. Beside it you write, make room for the unplanned. As you stand, a teenager nods approval and adds a constellation above your tree. Collaboration with the unknown made literal on brick. Night settles. You sit at your desk, echo snoring underfoot, and open the notebook to the page where you wrote build a sanctuary bigger than fear. Beneath it you write tonight's lesson. Freedom is rehearsal for surprise. You close the cover, extinguish the lamp, and let darkness hold its shape untouched. Hours later, rain deepens, drumming against windows like distant applause. You dream again of the rope bridge, but this time you pause mid-span, lean over the railing, and watch fog swirl below. From the mist rises every earlier version of you. Child clutching a dragon sketch, teenager gripping sheet music, young adult counting calendar blocks, exhausted worker hiding behind spreadsheets. They wave unafraid. You wave back, neither rescuing nor dismissing them. The bridge steadies, the wind quiets. You turn toward the unseen shore ahead. Take one deliberate step, then another. No urgency, no script, just trust in plank, rope, breath. When dawn returns, you wake with a calm so anchored it feels geological. You realize the rope bridge dream is not promise of safety but assurance of capacity. You'll cross gusty spans again, layoffs, illness, heartbreak, but the practiced dance with uncertainty will guide your feet. You rise, open a blank document, and begin drafting your keynote for the symposium. A tapestry of cedar trees and trickster gods, of rope bridges and improvised poems, of corporate experiments and chalk murals. You title it in bold letters, Order, Chaos, and the Spacious Self. You know the audience will expect frameworks and acronyms. Instead, you will give them stories and silence and the challenge to leave margins unfilled. You stop typing, close your eyes, and picture the wider circle still unfolding. Mentorship ripples, classroom bonfires, anonymous chalk drawings, poetry echoing in arcades. You realize the conversation with chaos has become not just personal practice, but communal offering. The unknown no longer prowls outside your fortress walls. It sits at your table, pouring the tea. You breathe in, breathe out, and feel the next sentence arrive. An opening line for the keynote, a new seed. We meet here today not to tame uncertainty, but to invite it to teach us what certainty never could. You type it, save the file, and exhale a soft laugh. Outside, morning light spills gold across the cedar dragon mural, the chalk still bright despite rain. A passerby pauses, snaps a photo, and walks on. The world keeps improvising. And so will you. Days drift into a pattern that feels paradoxically fresh, structure latticed with intentional gaps wide enough for wonder. In one of those gaps, you find yourself wandering a weekend flea market tucked beneath an overpass. Vendors hawk tarnished brass instruments, vinyl records warped by attic heat, boxes of mismatched silverware whose ornate handles hint at forgotten dinner conversations. You pause at a store where a woman sells old photographs sorted into shoeboxes labeled strangers. Hundreds of sepia faces stare back. Weddings, picnics, soldiers in wool uniforms, children balanced on handlebars. You pick a photo at random. A man standing ankle-deep in ocean surf, trousers rolled, arms lifted as if addressing invisible disciples. His grin is audacious, almost prophetic. On the back, faint pencil reads, August 1929. Told the tide a secret. The phrase lodges in your mind. You purchase the photo, slip it into your journal, and leave the market with the odd sense that you've been handed an assignment. All afternoon you mull the idea of telling secrets to the tide, confessing hopes to something vast enough to keep them, fluid enough to carry them elsewhere. That evening you drive to the coast, park near the jetty where you once contemplated lighthouses and legacy. The sea is calm, reflecting a bruised violet sunset. You walk to the waterline, shoes in hand, and wade until frigid foam curls around your calves. Half thrumming, you speak aloud a secret too fragile for any inbox or notebook. A desire to one day disappear from all calendars for a season, to wander unnamed trails with only curiosity for compass. The confession feels reckless and holy. Waves tug the wordless wish from your lips, dissolving it into salt. Driving home, the restlessness is gone, replaced by quiet excitement, as if the ocean, like an oracle, accepted payment for future possibilities. You realize the act of vocalizing a hidden yearning to an indifferent universe, paradoxically, invests it with power. Jung called such gestures acts of active imagination, not mere fantasy, dialogue with the unconscious. You wonder how many aspirations suffocate inside silent minds for lack of a witness, even a non-human one. The next morning, you research sabbatical policies at work. There is a program, buried under HR jargon, that allows unpaid leave after 5 consecutive years of service. You qualify. Fear surges, but instead of retreating, you negotiate with it. 6 months, modest budget, remote cabin near the mountain cedar. You draft a proposal highlighting how time away will incubate fresh perspectives for the company upon return. You attach metrics from past innovative projects born of flexibility. You hit send, pulse racing, yet strangely calm. The ocean and the sepia profits stand behind you like silent sponsors. While awaiting the decision, you turn attention to the upcoming keynote. You decide to weave interactive pauses into the talk, moments when the audience will sit in silence long enough to feel the hum beneath their own thoughts. On the day of the symposium, you stand backstage watching engineers calibrate audio-visual equipment. The hall buzzes with the low-frequency anticipation peculiar to large gatherings. In your pocket rests the 1929 photograph. You rub its frayed edges, grounding yourself in that stranger's bold grin. When introduced, you walk onto the stage carrying no notes. A collective inhale ripples through the audience. They expect slides, data, bulletproof arguments. Instead, you begin with a story about downsizing, insomnia at 2 a.m., the fortress of control cracking. You speak of rope bridges, storm candles, and chalk neurals. At the 20-minute mark, you invite silence. Lights dim slightly. Hundreds of people shift in seats, cough, murmur, then quiet settles like velvet dust. 30 seconds stretch to 60, 90. You feel the room's initial discomfort alchemize into something luminous, an almost audible collective heartbeat. When lights brighten, you ask attendees to write the first unplanned thought that surfaced during the hush. Murmured gasps, hurried scribbles, some faces wet with tears. You close by reading the back of the photograph. August 1929. Told the tide a secret. You challenge them to tell their own tide a secret before week's end. Applause follows, slow then thunderous. You exit stage with lungs full of electrically charged air. 2 days later, HR approves your sabbatical. You feel a surge of gratitude so potent it borders on ache. Preparations begin. Sublet the apartment. Arrange caretakers for Echo, who will spend the months alternating between the neighbor's garden and your mentor's sprawling farmhouse. You pack essentials: notebooks, the Seaver sketch, the dragon drawing carefully rolled, a field recorder to capture forest sounds, and the shoebox of strangers' photographs, seeds of future stories. The cabin sits atop a ridge overlooking a valley painted in ever-shifting shades of green and gold. Its walls smell of pine resin and old books. Its silence is thick enough to stir with each step. Your first night, you light a fire and sit watching flames translate wood into crackling philosophy. No cell signal, no deadlines, only the soft ticking of expanding timber as the cabin warms. You whisper into the quiet, "Teach me what clocks can't." Days that unfold like origami, simple folds revealing complex shapes. You rise with dawn, hike to a viewpoint marked by cairns, record wind, playing the cedar branches like harp strings. Afternoons, you write essays that refuse conventional structure. Paragraphs meandering like creek water, ideas pooling in eddies before tumbling over metaphorical stones. Evening light leaks amber through dusty windows, and you read aloud to no one passages from Rilke, from John, from the strangers' lives you imagine between sepia grains. At first, restlessness flares, urge to check emails, to measure productivity. You respond by sitting longer, breathing slower, allowing the discomfort to crest and recede unaided. After a week, mental sediment begins to settle. Dreams grow vivid. Conversations with the mountain cedar, lessons from fox tracks in snow, councils where the dragon constellation debates with the rope bridge about the value of risk. Midway through the sabbatical, a violent storm snaps power lines. You spend 3 nights illuminated only by oil lamp and lightning. Paradoxically, those hours feel brightest. Symbols surge without digital glare. Pages fill with raw sketches. The field recorder captures thunder that later becomes the bass line for a spoken word piece you perform to the wild, empty dark. You taste a flavor of freedom unattainable in curated light. The sabbatical's final month, you invite 3 mentees to visit for a weekend retreat. They arrive burdened with city tension. You watch shoulders drop as pine air rewires lungs. You guide them through silent walks, tidal secret rituals using a nearby river, and improvised poetry fireside. On departure day, they leave thank you notes hidden around the cabin, under a mug, inside a book's spine, taped to Echo's collar. One reads, "I found room for my own voice in the quiet you made." You fold the note, place it in the field notes box, another artifact of connection. Return to the city is gentler than feared. Apartment greets you with familiar scent of paper and jasmine. Echo bounds through rooms restoring his dominion. You hang a new drawing above the desk. A rope bridge morphing into a dragon mid-span, cedar roots weaving the plaques. Under it you pin a fresh page, write, "Chaos is the soil, uncertainty the rain, presence the seed." Emails swarm, but panic does not. You triage, delegate, delete. Colleagues remark on your calm. You smile, sipping tea infused with mountain mint you dried yourself. Projects resume, but you schedule weekly blank hours titled Tide. Some weeks you spend them walking riverside, whispering new desires to the current. Other weeks you sit on park benches, letting squirrels teach improvisation. Months pass. The workbook publishes. Students send photos of doodled pages, blooming with their own symbols. The symposium releases your keynote online. Hues climb, but more satisfying are the comments. Strangers describing their first experiments with purposeful uncertainty. You reply to several, encouraging nuance over bravado, curiosity over conquest. One crisp morning, you receive a parcel with no return address. Inside lies a sepia photograph, the same man from 1929, but now mid-stride, waves lapping knees, arms thrown wide, grin wilder. On the back, fresh ink reads, January 1930. The Tide answered. Beneath, a line in smaller script. Your story continues. You hold the photo, heart hammering. Whether prank or synchronicity, the message feels incontrovertibly real. You tape the new photo beside the first, twin doors into a mystery bigger than your comprehension. You realize stories do not end. They cascade. The cedar keeps dancing, the tide keeps whispering, the self keeps widening to house them both. You close your eyes, breathe sea salt memory into city air, and feel the rope bridge sway gently beneath you, steady, inviting, endless. Weeks flow into seasons, and the rhythm of alternating immersion and return, mountain quiet and city cadence, becomes a kind of internal tide chart you can read by instinct. You sense when to withdraw into stillness and when to lean outward into collaboration. One November afternoon, you receive an invitation from an unexpected quarter. A public school arts coordinator has watched your keynote and wants to adapt your spacious self-practices for adolescents on the cusp of graduation. The proposal sparks equal parts excitement and apprehension. Teenage classrooms can be fiercer than conference halls, but you accept, remembering the boy who folded his dragon drawing, the hallway singer who froze. Perhaps you can help these students keep their art unfolded, their voices warm. The program launches on a rain-slick Monday. Fluorescent hallways smell of disinfectant and heartbreak. You enter a classroom where desks are etched with initials and small rebellions. 30 pairs of wary eyes track your every gesture. Instead of a lecture, you hand out blank index cards and ask them to write one thing they believe they must control to succeed. Shuffling, sighs, scribbles. A girl with lavender braids rolls her eyes but writes anyway. Collected, the cards read like a thesaurus of pressure, grades, image, parents' expectations, college acceptances, body, reputation, future. You shuffle the deck, hold it up, and tell them you'll meet again in 6 weeks to see if any card has loosened its grip. Over the next sessions, you guide them through micro-uncertainty drills, 2 minutes of wordless eye contact with a stranger, one improvised sentence added to a communal story, a single unfiltered question posed to the room. Resistance flares, jokes shield nerves, but moments of unguarded brilliance leak through. Laughter that sounds like pure oxygen, a poem scratched on a desk corner, a spontaneous beatbox rhythm that turns the air electric. You teach them the tide ritual using a plastic tub of water. Each student whispers a private wish into the ripples. The tub sits by the window all semester, water level dropping with evaporation, wishes rising like vapor into the ceiling tiles. On the final day, you return the deck of cards. Some students tear theirs up on the spot. Lavender braid girl stands, reads hers aloud. I thought I had to control my anger. She folds the card into a paper boat, places it on the dwindled water, and watches it drift until the prow softens and sinks. Applause erupts, genuine and ragged. You feel a swell of hope, tiny sanctuaries sprouting inside a fluorescent fortress. Leaving the school, you realize education systems often mirror corporate ones. Tight schedules, high stakes, fear of mistakes. Yet small pockets of spaciousness can bloom even there if someone risks opening a window. You commit to returning next term. At home that night, you pin a new phrase under your compass: open windows in closed rooms. It reminds you that transformation is less about demolition, more about ventilation, letting fresh weather swirl through stagnant air. Winter deepens, snow hushes streets, muffles sirens. One silent night you dream of the man in the photograph again, but this time you stand beside him at the shoreline, both of you laughing at the absurd vastness of the sea. He hands you a small glass bottle sealed with red wax. Inside, coiled like a sleeping snake, lies a silver ribbon etched with words too small to read. You wake before opening it, but the feeling lingers, a promise unopened, possibility in suspended animation. Days later, you share the dream with your therapist, who smiles and says perhaps the ribbon is the next narrative waiting. You nod, uncertain. That afternoon, while clearing shelves, a scrap of foil wrapper curls like silver ribbon into your lap. Synchronicity or coincidence, you don't analyze. You tuck it into the field notes box, a placeholder for the unread message. Spring returns with luminous urgency, green shoots piercing thawed soil, air buzzing like tuned wires. Your sabbatical essays attract a small publisher intrigued by hybrid memoir myth styles. Contracts are drafted, edits begin. The process is collaborative, fluid. An editorial meeting ends with the entire team walking barefoot in a city park to practice intentional unpredictability. Passers-by stare, but you and the editors laugh, clay squishing between toes, corporate attire flapping in breeze. Business does not combust. In fact, creativity spikes. A video arrives in your inbox. Students from the high school program performing a shadow integration slam poem at the City Arts Festival. The lavender braid girl closes the performance with a line that pierces you. I am both storm and shelter. Fear doesn't fit the new floor plan. Cheers surge, footage shaky with enthusiasm. You wipe tears, surprised by their salt. On the anniversary of your first cedar hike, you return to the ridge. The tree stands, twisted arms now budding vivid chartreuse. You press palm to bark, pulse sing with sapper eyes. You whisper the unopened wish still coiled in the dream bottle. Wind answers through needles, a sibilant yes older than language. You leave a ribbon of mountain mint tied around a branch, an offering, a thank you, a reminder. Descending the trail, you accept that the story will never resolve into tidy moral. It stretches like the rope bridge, always another sway, another plank, another mist-veiled shore. But your feet know the dance now, your lungs trust the wind, and your heart keeps space for strangers' photographs, for plastic tubs of evaporating wishes, for silver ribbons unread. Back in the city, you open your window wide, though cold air knifes through. You sit at the desk, echo curling against your feet, and begin drafting a letter to yourself 10 years hence. You write, may you continue to welcome uncertainty with lantern in hand. May you remember the cedar's crooked elegance. May you keep telling secrets to tides and listening for their answers in dreams. The words feel like fresh water swallowed after a long climb. You seal the letter, slip it into the field notes box, and feel once more the quiet thrill of an ever-widening circle. Summer dawn creeps in rosy and slow, and with it comes a letter that has traveled farther than any plane ticket you ever booked. The envelope is cream, edges worn, postmark smudged beyond recognition. Inside is a single page of thick paper bearing the faint scent of sea salt. The handwriting is slanted, almost familiar. You unfold it cautiously, half expecting a marketing flyer misdelivered. Instead, the page reads, you don't know me yet, but I watched you at the shoreline last spring. I was the stranger sketching gulls who heard your voice drift over the water as you whispered something into the tide. I don't know what wish you surrendered, but the way you stood there, unsteady, defiant, made me believe my own private tides could be trusted. I left the beach different than I arrived. This morning, I found the courage to leave a job that kept my creativity in chains. I'm writing to thank you for the invisible permission you granted when you thought no one listened. May this gratitude return to you multiplied. No signature, only a rough sketch of waves at the bottom margin. For several breaths you stare at the ink until the room tilts with unreality. A bridge of unseen influence arcs back to you, proving that the quietest gestures can echo in lives you'll never enter. You pin the anonymous letter beside the sepia photographs, creating a triptych of dialogue across decades. The 1929 prophet is 1930 answer, and a modern ripple from your own surrender. The wall of artifacts feels less like decoration. more like a breathing map. That evening, clouds stack in graphite layers above the skyline. Instead of dread, you sense invitation. Storms now remind you of the power hidden in unstable air. You gather a small bag and walk to an abandoned warehouse fated for demolition. Graffiti artists have claimed the interior walls, blazing with dragons, cedar branches, and rope bridges, images you once posted online. You marvel at how symbols migrate, evolve, hybridize. A masked painter nods recognition and gestures toward a blank panel of concrete. Without words, they hand you a can of turquoise spray paint. Your pulse kicks like stage lights warming. You trace the outline of an open window, wind-swept curtains billowing, nothing inside except generous darkness. When finished, you step back. The artist adds a silver ribbon, curling out of the void. Letters too small to read unless you stand close. You don't read them, choosing to leave some mysteries intact. Rain hammers the roof, rivulets racing down shattered panes. The artist offers a fist bump and disappears into dripping shadows. You walk home soaked, colors bleeding from shoes onto pavement, but heart incandescent. Days later, a call from the publisher. Your hybrid essays, long listed for a national award. You register the news with calm surprise. External validation, once an oxygen tank, now feels like a pleasant breeze. You celebrate by booking a one-room coastal cabin you've never visited, deciding to spend a week writing nothing, reading nothing, simply listening. On arrival, you realize the shoreline curves exactly like the sketch on the anonymous letter. Low tide exposes rippled sand flats dotted with tide pools. You kneel, see tiny crabs scuttle under eelgrass, worlds contained in puddles no larger than a footprint. On the fourth evening you walk barefoot at dusk, feel cool silt squish between toes. The horizon glows molten, sky shading from apricot to indigo. Wind lifts your hair, carrying gull cries, and the hush of distant swells. You turn inland and notice someone sitting atop a driftwood log sketching fervently. Their silhouette seems carved from the same dusk as the old sepia photos. You hesitate, then approach, offering a quiet greeting. They look up, middle-aged, eyes the color of wet stones. Without introduction, they pass you a fresh sheet from their pad and a charcoal nub. Wordlessly, you sit beside them. The two of you draw until night erases color, until stars salt the firmament. When done, you trade pages. Their drawing is a window billowing curtains, yours a shoreline tide carrying sealed bottles. You laugh softly, twin symbols crossing like comets. Before parting, they speak. Art looks for its people. You nod, pocket their sketch, leave yours in their hands. No names exchanged, yet recognition pulses stronger than biography. Home again, you slip the charcoal window into the field notes box. Memory stirs, the silver ribbon curling from your spray paint window in the warehouse. You consider returning to read its letters, but decide some promises must remain unopened to keep pathways of possibility uncollapsed. Weeks fold into the hush of early autumn. School resumes. You launch a new cycle with the seniors. This year introducing the Seda ritual. Students visit a local park, each choosing a crooked mentor tree, sketching its imperfections, writing letters of affiliation. The lavender-braid girl, now sporting copper pixie cut, sketches a lightning-scared oak and writes a spoken-word piece that ends, "My fractures photosynthesize." The class snaps fingers in unison, an urban forest of approval. Meanwhile, the sabbatical essays win the award. At the ceremony, you walk a red carpet that feels surreal beneath your recycled paper shoes. Reporters ask for sound bites about success. You quote the anonymous letter and the cedar tree. Cameras blink. Some in the crowd look puzzled, others intrigued. You leave early, carrying the trophy in a canvas tote that once held groceries. At home, Echo sniffs the metallic statuette, deems it uninteresting, and settles his head on your foot. a grounding more valuable than accolades. Tonight, as rain tiptoes across windows, you open a new journal and title the first page Further Unmapped Territory. You list inklings rather than goals, host a silence retreat in the city, collaborate with graffiti artists to create public breathing walls, develop a curriculum for corporate teams that begins with a walk, ends with a poem. The possibilities feel less like targets, more like seas waiting for the right weather. You set the journal aside, dim lights, and sit facing your wall of artifacts. Sepia tides, gratitude letter, charcoal window, mountain mint ribbon, chalk seeded dragon. Each piece pulses faintly, constellations of choices made in partnership with uncertainty. You understand that you are both cartographer and explorer, mapping a landscape that reshapes under every step. No line you draw is final. No window you open stays still. A gust rattles glass. Storm arriving. You smile at its timing, rise, and open the actual window wide. Cool wind rushes in, carrying night jasmine and distant thunder. You whisper into the dark, "I'm listening." The wind answers with a hush that sounds like turning pages, and the circle widens once more. The gust grows into a steady breath, fluttering the pinned photographs and sketches like sails eager to depart. One loosens, the charcoal window, slipping its tack and gliding to the floor face up, curtains drawn in perpetual wind. You stoop to retrieve it and notice something new, faint beads of moisture, as if the paper has absorbed the gathering storm. A notion arises, playful and piercing. Perhaps every artifact longs to migrate, to be carried elsewhere, to stir lives beyond your walls. By morning, the storm has swept east. Streets glitter with puddles that mirror a sky rinsed clean. You bike across town to the condemned warehouse, curious whether the sprayed window still yawns in turquoise. Inside, dawn filters through skylight shards, painting the graffiti in cathedral colors. Your window remains, but the silver ribbon added by the other artist now unfurls further, snaking across adjacent panels. You step closer to read the tiny script. Some doors are painted on walls, so we remember walls are temporary. Below the sentence, an arrow points to a crumbling cinder block seam. Concrete has cracked, and beyond it you glimpse daylight. Part of the exterior wall has fallen away. Instinct overtakes deliberation. You and two strangers, one with paint-spattered overalls, another lugging a DSL, begin stacking loose bricks aside, widening the breach until a ragged portal opens onto weedy asphalt, sparkling with broken glass. The photographer laughs, snaps frames. Overalls shrugs and says, "Art broke the wall." You walk outside feeling the city's pulse louder, as if the building itself has exhaled after decades of holding in breath. That afternoon you draft a proposal to the Municipal Arts Council, transform the ruin into a public studio where boundaries remain literally porous, windowless, walls breathed through by new openings. You title the project Sanctuary of Unfinished Walls. Momentum builds. Local businesses donate lumber, students volunteer to sweep debris. Lavender Pixie graduate designs a mural blueprint. The masked artist returns with crates of paint. Even the school's stern principal arranges buses so teenagers can prime cinder block during service hours, their laughter ricocheting where pigeons once ruled. Weeks blur with the grit of construction and the glow of collaboration. On soft opening night, no speeches, only a signal. Doors propped wide, floodlights angled skyward like searching questions. People wander in carrying instruments, clay, notebooks, unresolved grief. Someone plants saplings in cracked floor, ringed by soil carted in buckets. A jazz trio coaxes music from shadows. A shy elder recites haiku to echoing applause. You stand by the original turquoise window, its painted curtains fluttering in real breeze, pouring through the new breach. Echo trots between paint cans, tail white-tipped with primer. Near midnight, the stranger with the DSR approaches bearing a small parcel. Inside lies a roll of photographic film, each frame a shot of individuals pausing at the window you once traced. Reverse silhouettes hallowed by sunrise, kids finger tracing the edges, lovers leaning forehead to forehead within its frame. On the final strip, you see yourself, unaware, gazing through turquoise into widening dark. Behind you, the newly added script curves upward. Walls remember who dared to question them. Later, sitting on a half-finished bench of reclaimed joists, you unspool what all this means. Not a trophy, not a curriculum, but an ecosystem. Every surrender feeding another person's courage, each openness breeding unexpected architecture. You recall Jung's idea that the self is both center and circumference, personal and collective radiating together. Sanctuary of unfinished walls is circumference made tangible, breathing proof that integration scales beyond the psyche. Months pass, seasons tilt again. Wild vines root in mortar cracks, weaving green into graffiti. The studio hosts improvisational science fairs where kids drop Mentos into sodas beside poets penning villanelles. Corporations book retreats, expecting PowerPoint, leave nursing seedling pines to plant back at headquarters. You step back often, letting others lead, remembering that too much control would fossilize the very space meant for aloofness. One quiet summer dawn you arrive early, echo padding behind. Light spills through every gap, pooling gold on concrete. You tack a new index card beside the window, blank except for a penciled question mark. Beneath, you write tiny, space reserved for whatever needs asking next. You step away, pocket the remaining tack, and feel a hush settle, promise of unknown chapters already coiling in the collective mind. You leave as first volunteers arrive, their voices weaving into morning like bright thread. Paddling home, you sense the story neither starts nor ends with you. You are one breath in a long conversation between certainty and possibility. Tires hiss on damp asphalt, and the city smells again of jasmine and wet stone. Alive, unfinished, inviting. You breathe in that unfinished air, release it slowly, and smile, ready for the next unentered room, the next wall waiting to listen. Autumn slides in quietly, ushered by a nip that sharpens the edges of morning. The sanctuary of unfinished walls now hums like a living organism. Paint still dries in one corner while, in another, musicians rehearse a melody that bends scales in ways theory books have yet to name. When you arrive these days, no one looks for a leader. They look for a place to add their breath to the collective lung. On a chilly Friday evening, a trio of retirees wheels in a vintage printing press donated from a shuttered newspaper plant. Volunteers clear space, grease gears, and within hours sheets of thick cotton paper roll out, blank invitations waiting for ink. Someone suggests an overnight dream broadsheet. Participants will sleep on site, record their dreams at dawn, and set them in movable type before breakfast. The idea feels improbable, therefore irresistible. You volunteer to keep first watch. At midnight, the building settles into a primordial quiet broken only by distant traffic sighs and the flutter of bats through lattice rafters. You sit near the turquoise window, sketchbook on your knees, drawing the press's iron arms as though they're ancient guardians. Echo dozes at your feet, occasionally twitching, dreaming, perhaps, of mice or the vastness beyond fences. Around 2 a.m. you climb to the mezzanine, where old office cubicles once overlooked the factory floor. One cubicle still houses a cracked cork board peppered with yellowed memos. In a desk drawer you find carbon paper and an employee ledger from 1973, scrawled among Punch-In Times art doodles, a violin, a rope bridge, a window flung open toward clouds. You feel a jolt, symbols recurring across decades, as if the building itself was dreaming this place into existence long before you arrived. Near dawn, participants stir from sleeping bags. You hand out coffee and blank dream forms. Whisper accounts of flying over neon deserts, chasing giant hourglasses, dining with extinct birds, pour onto pages. The printing press rattles to life. Its rhythmic clank seems to translate REM language into typographic flesh. By noon, broadsheets hang from twine, ink shimmering wetly like freshly hatched stories. Visitors later read the dreams aloud, laughter and quiet gasps intermixing. One child points to a line, "I opened a door and found my own voice singing on the other side," and asks if that really happened. You answer it did, somewhere truer than maps. That evening, while others sweep stray paper shavings, you pocket a misprinted sheet. Ink smeared, letters coasted, imperfect. It feels truer than the polished copies, a testament to process. At home you tape it beside the charcoal window, layering the college deeper, a palimpsest of surrendered control turned artifact. Weeks later you receive a letter stamped with the City Arts Council seal. Funding approved to weatherproof the sanctuary's roof and install skylights that can open for ventilation. Literal breathing architecture. The crew assigned includes trade students from the high school you mentor. During breaks they share mixtapes and ask about Jungian archetypes. You trade them iced chai for their theories about video game narratives mirroring heroes' journeys. Walls widen yet again. You notice your calendar's blank tide hours have expanded. Whole weekends now labeled simply wilderness or wandering. One such weekend you return to the shore where you once told the tide your secret. Wind sculpts sand into shifting dunes, erasing footprints almost as they fall. In your backpack rests the misprinted dream sheet and a small glass bottle. At water's edge you read the smudged dream aloud. Roll it tight, seal it in the bottle, and fling it past the break. The wave receives it like a messenger returning to headquarters. You watch until glass and sunlight become one shimmer. Back in the city, autumn deepens into early dusk and metallic air. You develop a ritual of cycling to different bridges at twilight, suspension, truss, arch, pausing mid-span to feel vibration of traffic and river merging. One rainy ride, you stop under a bridge arch to avoid a downpour and discover a violinist playing Vivaldi to no audience but the echo. Water sheets off concrete in silver veils. The music vaults upward. You stand silently until the piece ends, then clap. The violinist bows, surprised, and says, "I practice here so mistakes drown." You reply, "Best acoustics for bravery." She smiles, asks about the paint flecks on your jacket. You tell her of the sanctuary. Weeks later she performs there, her concerto weaving into spray paint hiss and printing press thrum. Winter's first frost paints the sanctuary's concrete slabs white. Volunteers set up heaters, breath clouds mingle with aerosol mist. You stand near a new breach. Another artist took a sledgehammer to expose a view of the river. Cold air knifes through, but nobody complains. A poet tapes a sign. Drafts welcomed. Walls too. At night, you host a candlelit salon on the gift of the unfinished. Attendees share works in embryonic stages, half-built robots, chord progressions, half-remembered folk tales. Laughter greets failures as warmly as breakthroughs. You end the night quoting the cedar. Crookedness carries wind better than straightness ever could. Heading home, you feel city lights refract through leftover snowfall, casting prism patterns on asphalt. Echo pulls ahead, eager to chase flurries. You realize you haven't clenched your jaw in months. The field notes box is nearly full. Soon you'll start another. You wonder if, years hence, someone will open these boxes and find roadmaps for their own uncertainty. At your desk, before sleep, you open the current journal to the page, titled Further Unmapped Territory, and add one final note beneath the list of inklings. Remember walls listening, winds speaking, stories breathing. You cap the pen, exhale slowly, and trust that the widening circle has no edge, only constantly unfolding horizons inviting the next courageous step. You close the journal. Outside, snow begins again. Quiet, unpredictable, perfect. Snow carries its own hush, like a librarian gently pressing a finger to the city's lips. In that hush you discover winter's peculiar gift. Every sound, footfall, whispered greeting, page turning, acquires the crisp resolution of a bell. The sanctuary attunes to it too. Cold radiates through unfinished walls, yet people keep arriving bundled in patchwork scarves, breath puffing like speech bubbles before a story is spoken. One evening, while hanging industrial blankets to dampen the draft near the river breach, you overhear a student reciting lines from their dream broadsheet, translating them into Spanish for a newcomer who sketches geometries of snowflakes on scrap canvas. Their voices braid languages until meaning transcends syllables. You pause, blanket half-tied, and feel something click. The project is no longer yours but polyphonic, passed from hand to hand like a shared lantern. Shortly after the new year, a parcel wrapped in brown paper appears on the bench beneath the turquoise window. Inside rests an antique compass whose needle spins freely, refusing to obey magnetic north. A note reads only, "Found at low tide. Thought it belonged here." You place the compass atop the misprinted dream sheet on the college wall. Its restless dial reflects lamplight in slow revolutions, a silent sermon on directionless exploration. February ice storms descend, snapping tree limbs, halting buses, icing bridges you love to cross. The city slows to a breath. Mail pauses, workshops cancel. Sanctuary volunteers shovel paths while inside. Artists huddle around radiant heaters, turning out miniature works they can keep warm in gloved hands. Pocket poems, warm shell dioramas, thumbnails of murals yet to bloom. You join them, carving tiny cedar silhouettes from driftwood collected last summer. Each cedar retains a curve, a scar, a nod to the mountain original. When the city thaws, you slip these wooden trees into coat pockets of strangers on trams, a quiet woodland expanding through fabric and serendipity. Thaw brings unexpected correspondence. A community center in a distant coastal town has read about the sanctuary's breathing wall philosophy and requests guidance on transforming their own derelict warehouse. You realize replication isn't the goal, contagion is. You draft a letter not of instructions, but of provocations, questions about what their local winds want, what their community's unfinished stories crave. Weeks later, they reply with photos of children chalking open windows on rusted shipping containers. Even from hundreds of miles away, you recognize the turquoise shade. Spring edges in, timid at first, then bursts, and with it, a touring ensemble of musicians visits the city. They ask to perform inside the sanctuary, choreographing a symphony around intervals of silence. You set up chairs, some upright, some laid flat for resonance, while echo sniffs instrument cases like customs officer of wonder. On performance night, brass and wind and strings trade echoes with dripping pipes and distant train horns. At one pause, so complete you swear the building itself inhales. A solitary violin sustains a single note until it melts into the ambient hum of sodium street lamp. Listeners hold that hush like water they're afraid to spill. When the final chord resolves, applause rises slowly, not erupting but blooming. Later, sweeping the concrete, you find a rosin cake shaped like a small amber window. You leave it on the ledge near the compass, another artifact in the living college. The wall is crowded now, layers deep, but never cluttered. Each piece converses with the others like guests at a long table. Summer returns. Dusk paints the river violet, and the sanctuary hosts a lantern festival. Paper vessels bearing handwritten possibilities set afloat downstream. Standing on the bank, you watch flickers drift until current and distance fold them into starlight on water. Someone beside you murmurs, It looks like the sky fell and decided to keep going. You don't know their name, but you nod, because the statement fits everything these past years have taught. Constellations are not fixed. They wander when invited. When you climb the river stairs back to street level, Echo pauses, sniffing at something lodged between bricks. You kneel and extract a glass bottle, sea-worn, cork intact. Inside, curled tight, lies a silver ribbon. Your pulse knocks against ribs. Hands tremble as you ease it free. In moonlit glow, words reveal themselves. When windows walk, follow. Beneath, the faint outline of a cedar tree etched from shining thread. You pocket the ribbon without deciphering further, sensing that some messages ripen with patience. At home, you pin it last, above compass and dream sheet, below sepia tide prophets. The college now resembles a topographical map of wonder. Ribbons as rivers, windows as lookout towers, compass as restless sun. You step back, heart thudding gentle thunder. The story started as yours, then ours, now everyone's. Rain whispers against pain. Echo circles twice before settling. You sit at the desk, open a fresh journal and write one line. The map keeps widening because the world keeps listening. No plan beyond that. You cap the pen, lean into the chair, and let the evening listen back. Beyond the open window, city sounds harmonize. Bus brakes sigh. A late cyclist's bell rings like a question. Distant laughter ricochets between buildings. Each noise feels valiant, unguarded, alive. You close your eyes, feeling the rope bridge sway, the cedar root deeper, the tide return. The compass needle spins, but your pulse beats steady, synchronized with a future that welcomes its own surprises. And somewhere downriver, lanterns continue drifting, carrying small, brave wishes toward oceans of unfinished possibility. Late summer stretches into a sequence of heat-hazed afternoons. Cicadas rattle like faulty projectors, screening memories of seasons just past. You spend mornings at the sanctuary repairing paint that the sun has dimmed, layering fresh color over yesterday's brightness, accepting that even vibrancy needs replenishment. In the afternoons, you stroll the river path, tracing the route where the silver ribbon appeared. You keep it in a pocket of your notebook. Its stitched cedar glints whenever light finds an angle. One restless evening, you unroll the ribbon on your desk and study the phrase again. When windows walk, follow. The words feel like instructions from a dream you haven't had yet. You flip through earlier journals, searching for echoes, discovering sketches of doors, sprouting legs, stained glass arches, leaning forward as though eager to migrate. You hadn't thought much of those doodles at the time. Now they hum with unfinished intention. The hum grows louder a week later when a friend texts a photo taken downtown. Your turquoise window, identical in hue and style, has appeared on the side of a delivery truck parked outside a music venue. The image shows curtains rippling, as if stirred by real wind, although the panel is flat steel. Beneath, someone has painted an arrow followed by 3 ellipses, like an invitation to continue the sentence elsewhere. You rush to the location, but the truck is gone, leaving behind the faint smell of fresh aerosol. The sighting sparks a scavenger hunt. Messages pour in from acquaintances who spot the window on boxcars, alley doors, even a massive construction tarp draped over a scaffold. Each instance points to another, arrow after arrow, a citywide treasure map formed in motion. You pin a large paper to your wall, marking pins and string like constellations of turquoise portals. A pattern emerges, windows migrating in a rough spiral outward from the sanctuary. One rainy dawn, you catch up to the phenomenon. A box truck idles behind a grocery store, its cargo doors painted with the walk-in window. 2 artists in overalls stand on ladders finishing details in quick, practiced strokes. You approach quietly, Echo at your heel. The taller artist steps down, mask dangling, recognition flickering in their eyes. You met months earlier at the warehouse breach. Without preamble, they say, the windows need new walls to remind the walls they aren't prisons. They gesture for you to add something. You climb the ladder, trembling with the weight of spontaneous ritual, and outline a small cedar sapling at the window's sill. The artist nods approval. They hand you a sticker bearing coordinates and a date 3 weeks ahead. That's where the windows will rest. Bring stories. Curiosity burns brighter than sleep for days. You research the coordinates. An abandoned rail yard 40 miles east, slated for redevelopment. On the appointed morning, you borrow a rusty pickup, load folding chairs, a camp stove, a box of blank notebooks, and of course the field notes box. A convoy of artists, students, musicians, retirees, and children converges on the yard, guided by text chains and intuition. The scene resembles a carnival of incompletion. Rolling shutters tagged with galaxies, shipping containers draped in patchwork quilts of graffiti, pop-up canopies sheltering typewriters and looms. At the center stands a temporary pavilion formed from scaffolding and plexiglass sheets, each panel bearing the walking window motif. The pavilion breathes light, its translucent walls glowing turquoise and jade as morning sun climbs. Inside, tables hold printing presses, audio recorders, clay wheels, tools for translation more than creation. A chalkboard proclaims in looping hand, "Walk through window day, trade your unfinished for ours." Participants step up one by one, offering half songs, unsolved equations, incomplete memoir chapters. In return, they receive fragments from strangers, a melody to house their lyrics, a theorem's missing analogy, a childhood anecdote lacking a final image. You watch exchanges unfold like genetic recombination. Echo wins between knees collecting crumbs of applause. Mid-afternoon, clouds thicken and warm wind swirls dust into brief spirals. A hush ripples as the tall artist clambers atop the pavilion roof and unfurls a banner reading, "Windows walk west at sundown." Implicit invitation. Accompany them. Some pack crates of supplies onto flapped carts, others hoist rolled canvases on shoulders. You secure the field notes box under your arm, heart pounding with migratory thrill. As the sun kisses distant silos, the procession begins. The pavilion panels detach and become carrying shields of translucent color. Along the cracked asphalt, the procession blows like a mobile stained glass river, shards of turquoise and cedar silhouettes rippling over rusted tracks. Locals peer from doorways, some joining spontaneously, moved by the strange solemn joy. The march ends at a riverside bluff west of town, where wild grasses bend in wind that smells of loam and evening. Panels are reassembled into a half circle facing the sunset. People sit in portable chairs or on the ground. Someone kindles a small fire pit. Musicians weave an improvisation of violin harmonics and hand drum heartbeats. You set the field notes box at the circle's focal point. Open the lid, hand for the first time lay out its entire archive. Sepia photographs, gratitude letter, misprinted dream sheet, spinning compass, silver ribbon. A soft murmur rises as onlookers recognize themes they've encountered on walls, in workshops, in dreams. You are asked to speak, but words feel secondary. Instead, you open a blank notebook, write the line "When windows walk," follow in large script, and pass the notebook clockwise. As the book travels, each person adds a sentence, a sketch, or a fingerprint. By the time it returns, dusk has deepened, and fireflies replace sunlight in the pavilion's glass, blinking in rhythm with distant city lights. Someone reads the collaborative text aloud. It is nonlinear, contradictory, luminous, a chorus of directions and questions. The final line, penned in a child's wobbly letters, declares, "We don't close the circle, we keep rolling it forward." Silence follows, rich as soil. You feel tears cool on your cheeks, not sorrow but awe. Echo rests his head on your knee. The silver ribbon flutters under night breeze, cedar emblem catching starlight. Later, when campers settle into sleeping bags under the open structure, you sit by the riverbank, listening to water talk in hushes and splashes. You recall Jung's belief that collective individuation, the widening of circles, shifts culture itself. You think of the sanctuary's unfinished walls, now mirrored by traveling windows, of a city stitched together by turquoise sightings and cedar tokens. Moonlight pools on the notebook beside you. Its last page remains blank. You write, the horizon walks to. We follow and become it. You close the book, tuck it into the field notes box, and carry the box back toward the sleeping circle, its contents clinking softly, a constellation in a wooden vessel. As you settle into your own blanket, you spy a meteor streaking west, a reminder that even firmament is migratory. You close your eyes knowing the walk will continue in the morning and the morning after, long past any single storyteller's voice. You drift asleep to the lullaby of river and rustling glass, the compass needle in the college spinning beneath distant stars, tirelessly aligning to a direction that is everywhere, all at once, an unfinished invitation forever unfolding. Dawn rises pearl grey across the bluff, the river glazed in faint silver. You wake to soft guitar chords, drifting from the pavilion, where a solo musician tests strings against the quiet. The walking windows stand dew-flecked and translucent, now less like panels and more like thresholds awaiting their next migration. Campers stretch, share thermos coffee, exchange dreams caught in the brief weave between constellations and sunrise. Someone reads aloud an entry from last night's notebook. Every road is a sentence we finish together. Heads nod. Nobody rushes to decode it. After breakfast, a council gathers. No agenda, just questions tossed like stones into water. Where do the windows roam next? Should they split, seeding smaller circles, or journey intact toward a horizon not yet named? The compass from your college spins on a blanket in the center, its restless needle pointing everywhere and nowhere, a silent facilitator. Echo sits beside it, tail thumping approval for any and all possibilities. Discussion bends toward an eastward mountain town rumored to have an abandoned observatory. Someone claims the dome still turns. Someone else says feral cats rule its velvet interior. The idea sparks. Carry the windows to the observatory. Let starlight replace streetlight. Project collective dreams onto the curved ceiling where astronomers once mapped certainty in constellations. A vote is unnecessary. Momentum chooses for you. Preparations unfurl like quick-growing vines. Artists wrap the panels in thick blankets. Engineers bolt wheels to scaffold bases. Writers prepare chalk to annotate waypoints. The journey will require river barges, a freight elevator in an aging grain silo, and a mountain switchback road half crumbled by erosion. Logistics sound improbable, therefore irresistible. That afternoon you stroll the bluff, seeking driftwood for new cedar carvings. Near the waterline, you find a weathered crate half buried in sand. Inside rests a tangle of cassette tapes labeled with handwritten dates from the 1980s. Curiosity overrides schedule. You carry the crate to camp, dig out a battery speaker with tape deck. Someone inevitably packed one, and press play. Fuzzy audio crackles, field recordings of storms, children laughing, train whistles, a voice reciting dream fragments, very like your broadsheets. It's as though decades-old soundscapes washed ashore to underscore your present journey. The group listens, spellbound, letting nostalgia mix with novelty, and decides to integrate the tapes into the observatory installation, sound constellations to accompany projected dreams. Evening approaches. The caravan must depart before dusk to meet barge schedules. Panels are loaded onto flat-bottom boats, their turquoise glow shimmering across the water like sheets of captured aurora. You ride atop one, legs dangling over the bow, silver ribbon tied to your wrist fluttering in headwind. Riverbanks slide past where lanterns once drifted. Now seedlings of stories take root in muddy silt. At a lock station under sodium lights, an older lock attendant squints at the procession and asks, "Moving mirrors or moving doors?" You answer, "Moving invitations." He chuckles, waves the boats through, and jots something in a leather notebook, perhaps adding your caravan to a ledger of improbable sightings. Night folds over the river before barges dock at an old mill town. Volunteers haul windows into the grain silo's freight elevator, its gears groan but comply. As the final panel slides inside, graffiti previously hidden behind rust reveals a message. Sky is just unfinished thought. Phones illuminate the phrase, someone photographs, promising to project it later onto observatory walls. Past midnight, the caravan rests at a storage yard. You sleep under the stars on a tarp among fellow travelers. Dreams arrive vivid. You navigate an endless library whose shelves are moving sidewalks, each book a window showing not words but living scenes. You awaken pre-dawn, heart racing with the certainty that the next notebook entry must be communal moving shelves, not static pages. The climb to the mountain town is steep. Engines strain, cyclists escort, children chant improvised marching songs. Mid-slope, echo barks at a ridge where fog drapes pines like spectral curtains. The caravan pauses, mutual agreement to breathe. As mist swirls, a figure emerges, an elderly woman carrying a weather balloon. She explains she tracks microclimates for forgotten orchards. Hearing of your mission, she gifts data loggers coated in beeswax to record temperature and stories alike. You embed them in window frames, promising to send results. Finally, the observatory appears, dome silvered and dented, doors askew like eyelids half open after long sleep. Inside, dust motes float in shafts of angled light. Cats peer from broken consoles, vanish into star map drawers. Volunteers sweep decades of debris. Musicians test acoustics with low hums that climb the spiral staircase to the rotating drum. Windows are assembled around the circular platform, forming a ring of turquoise portals. As evening falls, the dome's shutter creaks open, letting moonlight pour like liquid mercury onto glass. Installation begins. Dream broadsheets projected onto the dome, cassette tape storms rumbling through vintage speakers. The spinning compass placed at center atop a small cedar pedestal you carved and wrote. People lie on blankets, gaze upward as words, sketches, and field recordings merge with constellations. Cassiopeia melds with cedar silhouettes. Laughter, sobs, whispered poems ripple like meteors. Close to midnight, the dome grinds, reorienting to a quadrant where the Milky Way smears bright across darkness. A hush falls, collective alignment of breath and beyond. In that silence, a child's voice rises. Are the stars watching us too? No one answers verbally. You imagine the stars wink in Morse code yes. You reach into your pocket, retrieve the silver ribbon. Under moon and projection glow, you finally read the cedar emblem's hidden text engraved in microletters. Rooted or roaming, sap flows the same. A simple truth, but it lands like revelation. You slip the ribbon around the compass needle. It spins, then steadies, pointing directly at a window panel reflecting moonlight. You walk to that panel, press your palm to cool glass, and feel faint vibration, maybe from projector fans, maybe from the mountain itself. In reflection, you see behind you the entire circle, travelers, windows, dreams, cats weaving tail comets across floor, all contained in turquoise frame. For a heartbeat, you hold the sensation of being both participant and passage, threshold and wanderer. Dawn edges pink through the open shutter. Someone begins reading lines from the collaborative notebook. We arrived as fragments. We depart as changed variables. Others join, turning pages like prayer wheels. You notice each reader's voice shifts into the echo of the dome, words overlapping like aurora bands. When the last page turns blank, the reader simply says, "Continue." Outside, mountains glow with first light, clouds blush. Volunteers open the observatory's side doors. Windows are wheeled into fresh air, glass reflecting a new horizon. No announcement, yet everyone feels the pivot. Time to walk again, though destination unknown. You close eyes, breathe mountain pine mingled with projector ozone, and let curiosity bud into direction. Echo nudges your knee, compass ribbon flutters, the caravan stirs. You step forward, confident that wherever the windows wander, following will unveil more unfinished pages. Morning sun tilts over the ridge, gilding the caravan as it coils down the mountain road like a luminous centipede. Dew beads on the turquoise panes, scattering rainbows across cracked asphalt. You walk beside the rolling windows, Echo trotting ahead, ribbon compass pulsing with each gleam of light. Nobody speaks of destinations anymore. You navigate by resonance, veering whenever a turn feels charged with yes. By late afternoon, the procession reaches a windswept plateau of tall grass, an in-between land where the highway stutters into gravel and power lines give up the sky. In the center stands an empty concrete foundation, an abandoned rest stop cleared years ago for a project that never materialized. The stark platform calls out like blank paper. Without instruction, volunteers angle the windows to form a spiral glass-catching sun until the plateau glitters like a falling galaxy. Someone unpacks the vintage printing press onto a makeshift plywood table. Others set up the cassette tape speakers, the dream notebooks, the beeswax climate loggers. The air thrums with a low expectancy, as though time itself has paused to watch what humans will do with momentum gathered through so many miles of surrender. Dusk slides in, grasses shimmer bronze. You climb onto the foundation's highest corner, raise your hands for quiet, and begin telling the story, not lecture nor sermon, but the braid of moments that brought everyone here. The folded dragon drawing, the Downsize company, the Seder's crooked benediction, the walking windows. Your voice cracks in places, but the cracks let wind pass through, carrying words deeper. When you finish, you invite anyone to speak their own fragment. Voices rise. The violinist who hid mistakes beneath bridge arches, the lavender pixie poet, now mentoring younger siblings in fearless metaphors, the weather balloon woman, charting microclimates and secret orchards. A child admits they once believed stars were pinholes in a curtain. Now they think the curtain is the pinhole. Laughter mixes with tears nobody wipes away. Night drops fully. Lanterns ignite around the spiral. Moths swirl, reckless with yearning. Someone opens the cassette of ocean storms, and waves crash invisibly across prairie grass. The circle sits in silence, listening to surf miles from any shore, proof that place is malleable when imagination invites it. You feel a tug at your sleeve. It's the tall artist. They hand you a small pane of glass, unpainted, edges polished smooth. A window that hasn't walked yet, they say. Pulse quickening, you carry it to the spiral's center, kneel, and set it atop the pedestal where compass and ribbon rest. The glass lies transparent, reflecting only stars. You stand, breathe, and address the gathering one last time. We have carried windows across rivers and ridges, but a window's purpose is not travel, it's passage. Tonight the windows stay, but we step through. You turn, face the spiral's mouth, and walk forward. Others follow single file, each pausing to touch the new pane, as if swiping a keycard into possibility. When the last person crosses, Echo noses the glass, tail beating, then trots after you. The plateau stretches ahead, dark save for lantern glow behind. Far off, faint highway lights flicker like distant campfires of another tribe. Someone asks, "Where now?" You answer, "Into the dark," until it listens. Footsteps resume, spreading side by side rather than in line, a widening front advancing into untamed night. Several yards on, you glance back. The spiral windows blaze turquoise, then dim, then extinguish one by one, as though acknowledging their mission complete. Above, Orion climbs, belt aligned perfectly with the direction you walk. For an instant, the constellation seems to mirror the caravan, celestial hunters tracking new horizons. Wind freshens, carrying cedar scent impossible this far from forest. You inhale, recognize the mountain's soul accompanying the expedition. Ahead, prairie grass parts revealing a downward slope toward faint water glints, a lake inscribed on official maps. Moonlight unrolls across the surface like a silver ribbon, answering the one fastened to your compass. A hush falls. You descend to shore, lanterns relit, reflections merging stars and humans into single luminous scatter. At water's edge you pull the compass free. Its needle no longer spins. It points steadfast toward the lake's center. Understanding blooms. Journey's end is not landfall but immersion. You wade, shoes abandoned, cold-biting calves, thighs, ribs. The caravan follows, laughter erupting with each gasp of shock. In knee-deep water people form a circle, ripples overlapping like shared pulse. You raise the blank window pane above your head, moon etched in its glass. This is the last wall, you say, voice trembling with cold and awe. Together, the circle presses fingers to the pane, lowering it until water touches edge, then lifts again, drenching lake droplets across every face. In that splatter, silence breaks open. Voices shout wishes, secrets, songs. Some whisper nothing at all, releasing noise to the night. The pane is passed hand to hand, dipped repeatedly, until its transparency fogs with fingerprints and droplets. When it reaches you again, you walk deeper, arms overhead, pain shimmering. At waist depth you let go. Glass slips beneath surface, catches moon one last time, then vanishes. For a breath you fear loss. Then you realize loss is the final doorway. You turn back, every face radiant with shared surrender. One by one, lanterns are placed on the water, floating outward, each carrying an unfinished thought. The lake dons a necklace of flames moving slowly toward center, converging where the pane descended. Flames cluster then drift apart, mimicking galaxies birthed from singular blaze. Shivering, exhilarated, the circle returns to shore. Clothes cling, but spirits flare. A volunteer strikes a match to driftwood. Fire roars, steam rising from bodies like newly opened portals. Someone produces the collaborative notebook, now swollen with water, pages blurring ink into watercolor constellations. The lavender pixie poet recites the smeared sentences anyway, translating smudge into cadence. Laughter peals, sorrow softens, all settles like dew. You sit, echo leaning warm against your calf, and watch flames dance. On your lap rests the field notes box, lid open to sky. You remove each artifact, sepia photos, gratitude letter, misprinted dream, twine-bound broadsheet of collective lines. One by one you feed them to the fire, not as sacrifice, but as compost, heat unlocking stories into smoke that swirls upward joining stars. The silver ribbon is last. You kiss its cedar emblem, toss it into flames. Sparks ascend, hurling like dragons learning to fly. Embers glow low, night tilts toward dawn. People drift to blankets, some stay by dying fire. You remain, half strangely light, despite the empty box. Echo raises his head. You scratch behind his ears and whisper, "We travel lighter now." First light glimmers, revealing shore littered with lantern husks and pebble mosaics formed by unknown hands during night's communion. You close the field notes box and hand it to the tall artist. Fill it with the next journey, you say. They nod, eyes bright with tears reflecting sunrise. The caravan will disperse soon, some returning to cities, some wandering further. You feel no ache. Circles widen. That is their nature. You walk alone to the waterline, lake now calm, pain invisible beneath surface, yet presence palpable. Kneeling, you whisper a final promise, to greet every future wall as moving window, every unknown as companionable wind. You stand, stretch, breathe dawn's clean chill, and turn toward the cresting sun. Behind you, voices stir, windows of turquoise memory etched in retina, heart, and sky. Ahead, land unfolds black as a fresh broadsheet, waiting for the next story to press into ink. If you liked this video, comment what you related to the most and hit the like and subscribe button.